well, of course. Richard Gage is the guest. He is the founder of Architects and Engineers for 911truth. His website is ae911truth.org, ae911truth.org. We're just going to get a tease from him today about what his organization has been investigating with regard to the September 11th, 2001 attacks. He will go into greater detail in the Truth Movement room in the social issues category of Pal Talk from 6 to 8 p.m. on Friday. For those of you who are on Pal Talk, you know how to get there. For those of you who are listening on the internet or on CRN Digital Talk Radio, fear not. Just go to ae911truth.org. Click on the button that links you right into the room. You'll be magically transported, and you'll have an opportunity to talk to Richard Gage yourself, and there is no charge for doing this. Okay, Richard Gage and I are going to have a very interesting conversation here, and you're going to jump in, ladies and gentlemen, with your questions. Because he and his organization and a whole multitude of other organizations, loosely called the Truth Movement, are very critical and concerned about what was reported to the American public by the 9/11 Commission and by the NITSE investigation. And I have some questions as well, but I have some questions about the questions. As you know, Richard, when I introduced myself to you a few minutes ago, I told you that on 9/11/2001, I was a reporter for CNN Radio. I covered that tragic day live on the air, and I covered the day after and the day after the day after, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and I'm still covering it. But I guess you would say that if I was properly covering it, I would be recognizing perhaps that there was some kind of a cover-up about what really happened. So I want to give you a few moments, Richard Gage, from the Architects and Engineers for 9/11truth, to kind of lay out to me and to my audience why you are so skeptical about what the government has told us.
Thank you, Gary. Well, about 4 years ago, I became aware of a lot of evidence that we had not seen on the mainstream media at all, or in the NIST reports. NIST is the National Institute for Standards and Technology, tasked with explaining these disasters, not just the two Twin Towers, but all three skyscrapers that were destroyed on that day. Many know nothing about the third worst structural failure in modern history. Most architects and engineers don't know about it at all. But on our website, ae911truth.org, you can see Building 7 coming down smoothly, symmetrically, suddenly, at free fall acceleration for 100 feet of this building's 6.5-second drop. It is accelerating straight down through the path of what should have been the greatest resistance, the 40,000 tons of structural steel in this building. And yet, it's falling as fast as a bowling ball that would be pushed off the side of the building, which has no resistance underneath it except for air at all. So how can this be? How can a 47-story skyscraper fall in the manner exactly like an explosive controlled demolition that we've all seen like the old hotels in Las Vegas, for instance? It makes no sense. And we have witnesses that hear sounds of explosions before this building comes down. And then we have witnesses and structural engineers and first responders that see pools of molten iron flowing like lava, they say, in the base of the debris of these all three buildings. Well, molten steel or iron doesn't happen until you have twice the temperatures that are available from office fires and jet fuel. So where does all this molten iron come from? That's also, and this melted steel, which is documented by not only FEMA, but by in their Appendix C of their 2002 report, but also throughout all of the World Trade Center dust. Our government officials and environmental firms find billions of very tiny, small iron microspheres. 6% of the dust in some places the dust is composed of these iron microspheres. Well, how do they get to be spheres? They get to be spheres in the air as a result of molten iron forming. Where does the iron come from? How did it get so hot? These are the key questions that we're going to be looking at on Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. And thermite is a likely answer for us.
I'm glad you corrected me. I'm glad you corrected me. That's 6 to 8 p.m., not 7 to 9. I said 7 to 9. It's 6 to 8. Let me just jump in one second, because I failed to properly introduce your credentials, because people are hearing you say all this stuff and they're probably asking, Gary, who the hell is this guy Richard Gage to be saying all this? How does he know what he's talking about? So could you just let us know a little bit about that before you continue on with what you're saying, Richard?
Sure. I'm an architect of 20 years, and I've worked on many different types of steel frame, fireproof buildings, commercial and mid-rise office structures. Recently in Las Vegas, a $400 million project with 1,200 tons of fireproof steel frame. So I have some degree of awareness of some of these issues, but I've been studying for 4 years now the collapse of the Twin Towers as well. When we look at the Twin Towers, what we see is not a gravitational collapse produced by this pile driver that goes down and pushing the rest of the building down to the ground in, by the way, less than a dozen seconds or so. It's going down extremely fast, but the problem is above the point of jet plane impacts is where we see this upper 15-story section disintegrating in on itself. Before there's any movement down, it's been totally destroyed in these bands of explosions described by the first responders as they see flashes of light and sounds of explosions. 118 of them reported this on tape, and yet none of it makes its way into the official story or the NIST reports. And there's hundreds of other witnesses of explosions in these buildings. So the upper pile driver has been gone. It was gone after 4 seconds. You can see it in the videos. You can see it in our DVD, which you can actually watch for free online at ae911truth.org right now. And you can see then after 4 seconds, it's the building tearing itself apart at free fall acceleration, straight down to the ground, hurling 9-ton perimeter wall units at 70 to 80 miles per hour, laterally landing 600 feet away. We also see explosions, isolated pockets of these explosions, highly focused, 20, 40, and even 60 stories down below this so-called crush zone. And they're coming out at 160 to 200 feet per second. These are pulverized building materials expelled at speeds only capable of being produced by explosives. And then we also have upward, outward arching streamers, the geometry almost of fireworks, an incredible symmetry about each of these twin towers, a very explosive event that looks more like a volcanic eruption. In fact, we compare it to the eruption of the in the Tongan Sea in 2009. It doesn't look anything like a gravitational collapse, which should have had this top portion slowly, gradually tilting and then colliding and jolting and stopping and maybe continuing toward the path of least resistance, not the greatest resistance, the 80,000 tons of structural steel straight down, keeping this collapse from happening at all, but maybe over. We don't have anything anything like that, and we don't have 110 floors found at the base of either of these towers. They've been completely pulverized to 100-micron particles like talcum powder, spread throughout lower Manhattan and beyond, in a blanket 4 to 12 inches thick, in which we find not only billions of iron microspheres formed from thermite, the only possible way they could have been formed, which is an incendiary used to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. But we also find, this international team of scientists, small red-gray chips, which turn out to be nanocomposite thermite materials, which is a high-tech explosive, basically. This should not be in all the dust samples of the World Trade Center. This is documented in a peer-reviewed paper, 25 pages, and it remains uncontested. They found nano-sized particles of iron oxide and aluminum powder. These are perfectly uniform and intimately mixed. It's extremely sophisticated stuff made only in the most advanced defense contracting laboratories.